Hello everyone and welcome back to the Red Right Hand. This is a channel about knives and knife things, knife stuff. Anyway, in this video I'd like to make a sheath, and if you're interested in learning how I do it, this is the place to be. Put together this blade a little while back. This just came off the bench. This is a 1084 and 15N20 twist pattern. I was really happy with the way it came out. And so I'd like to make a nice leather sheath for it. I like leather sheaths over Kydex, even though I know Kydex is extremely durable. It's really great for functionality. But for these type of knives, these are more decorative. I'm not really going to be putting these things through the paces anyway. So I like that classic look and feel of leather. I also really like working with it over Kydex. A few years back, I picked up this little blade from a company called Lion Steel. It's a nice little blade. This is a little 440 stainless. It's got the skinning hook on the back there. These are ram's horn scales. And it's been a pretty great knife for me. But one thing that really stood out after I bought it was this sheath. I just thought this was perfect. I like the way it sits on my hip. It slides in and out really easily. When I try to draw it, it doesn't get caught on this strap. It's durable. It seems really well made. And so I set out to make that kind of sheath for a couple of my knives recently, and I've really liked the way they've come out. This is one I did. You can see this is kind of a leaf-shaped blade, and it lends itself really nicely to this design. It's pretty straightforward, this design. It is, I guess, technically well, it's not really a one piece because you still have the welt in there, but it's not, two pieces of the similar profile stacked on top of each other. This does fold over, but the stitching goes almost all the way up the spine. So it's a little unusual, I guess, but I just like this design. And if you'd like to see how I make these sheaths and you're interested in putting one together, it's really not too complicated, pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, drop them down in the comments section and I'll be happy to get back to you. And I'm really, I'm not an expert leather worker anyway, so if you have advice or critiques, feel free to drop that stuff down there too. I'm just kind of learning as I go, but these are nice sheaths and I'll show you how I do it. All right, thanks for watching and stick around.
Before we dive in too deep here, I do want to say a word about the leather that I'm using. This is vegetable tan leather, and this is 7 or 8 ounce, which is right around 3 millimeters thick. I like that thickness because if you go too much thinner than that, you end up with kind of a floppy sheath, and I'm not crazy about that. And also vegetable tan leather, I think it really works well. It helps. It's really easy to shape and twist, and also I think the edges clean up much nicer. So that's what I prefer. As you can see, as I flip this over here to get the other side of the profile, I'm putting a little bit of an angle on it, and that will allow me some freedom to twist and kind of maneuver it a little bit to get these two halves to marry up properly when I fold the sheath over. I'm just using my spacing tool now to cut out a little bit beyond what the profile of the blade was. This is maybe 7/16 farther than the profile, and that's going to be your stitching area. Of course, you want to leave room for that. You can see it folds together pretty well, but it does require a little bit of twisting, and I've just got a little bit of water on the spine right here, and that allows me the ability to kind of stretch and twist and to get these to match up really nicely. And I'm using my little spacing tool again here to trace out the welt. You want to make sure you have a welt, otherwise when you put your sheath and you draw it in and out of put your blade in and out of the sheath, you're going to cut through your stitching. The welt will prevent that from happening. Now if you use the curvature that you've already cut out like I did, you'll just have to trim off a little bit of excess. But I like using that curvature because it's already, it's going to match up to what you've already cut out for the edge of your sheath. You can see it fits pretty well. These don't have to be perfect at this point. You can You can flex and you can twist a little bit, you can stretch a little bit. Again, this veg tan leather is really easy, and you can see I've got a little water in the spine there, and that's allowing me to kind of pull and stretch and get everything to match up how I want. It's a good time to do a fitment check. What I'm doing here is just trying to find just the right place for me to put my strap with the snap. You want that to be kind of on the narrowest part of the handle right before the heel of the blade. That way when you're, if you're wearing this on your hip or something, you're running around, the blade's not going to just fly out. It'll get caught on the strap. The hip of the blade will get caught on the strap, ideally. And I'm not precise about the thickness of this either, or the width of this. It's like maybe 3/4 of an inch. That's just kind of up to you. And it's more of an aesthetic thing than anything, as long as you're not going super thin. And I like to use my little hand knife here to clean up the ends of these straps. And then I tend to go over to the belt sander, if you have one. It's really nice for kind of fine-tuning the shape and cleaning up your edge work. Now I'm just getting a rough idea of the length of this strap. It's better to err on the side of caution here. You can always cut off more. And you'll notice that I don't actually put the snap on, the buttons on, until near the end of the project, because you want to make sure that you can pull that strap really tight so you've got a good secure fitment on there. I'm just cutting off a little excess because when I reach down to draw this blade, I don't want to grab a handful of leather. I want to be able to actually grab the handle, so I just had a little bit too much, and I'm trimming it down now. If you do have a belt sander, this is really nice. This is just a very old, worn down 80 grit belt, but I think if I were doing this by hand, or if it wasn't a worn down belt, I would probably be right around 120 or even as far up as 240. I don't think it really has to be that precise at this phase. You can see I've already put one line of holes for the stitching in there, and I'm just making sure that that first starter hole corresponds properly with the hole on the other side. And then once you do that, you just kind of go down the line here. Put the first tooth of your leather punch into the second hole that you did before, and that way you can make sure that your spacing is uniform as you go down the line. And then as you see here on the longer, straighter runs, I switch to a 5-tooth leather punch, and then I go back down to the 2-tooth when I get into the tighter turns. Now I'm just cutting out the belt loop strap, or the belt strap. Again, it's you don't want to go too thin on this. You want to make sure that it's flat enough that it'll keep the blade from shifting and twisting around. And then this is really important. The positioning of this strap is really important, because that's going to determine how high the blade and handle sit on your hip. So be mindful of that. Hold it up to your waist and do some checks there. You can see I've already got the holes punched out for the snap strap, and you could go through those same holes to put the top part of this strap on, but I like to do 2 separate fitments there, because otherwise you're stacking 3 pieces of leather. Now you could use a tool to thin that out, but I just like to do 2 separate attachment points for those things. And then use your awl here. I highly recommend you use an awl on all of these holes before you get into the stitching. Make sure you stab yourself in the hand like I just did. If you don't ream out those holes, you are going to end up struggling when it comes time to thread, because that leather will like to contract on itself. So definitely make sure you widen those out as much as you can before you get into the actual needlework. Now I'm just making sure that the welts are lining up right where I want them along the edge. And once I start with those first couple holes, I'm using my little tool here, which kind of gouges out a channel. Make sure that's spaced the same as the first few holes that I put in, and then I just continue on the same way I did the holes on the outer part of the sheath. Once you've got all your pieces cut and you're pretty happy with the way the edges look, and you know you're not going to trim off anymore, you can go ahead and start dyeing everything. I haven't tried this color before, but I really like the way it turned out. This is just brown leather. You can pick up all this stuff really from Amazon or any leather supply store. Definitely make sure you dump as much as possible all over your workbench. I guess it's fair to say I'm a little bit clumsy. Let's blame it on the missing fingers. But I don't know, eventually I get the hang of it and I stop pouring it all over my bench here. And you can keep applying more and more leather dye if you want it a little darker. You can kind of experiment with this stuff. It looks really blotchy at first, but you'll see that as we go on, and it's really dirty too because I'm kind of working in a dirty space, but it doesn't really matter that much. The leather actually cleans pretty well, and it gets much more uniform as you start to do the finishing process. Now for saddle stitches, which is what I like to use here, you can see I run the thread through the eye of the needle, and then I go back after a couple inches, and then I run the needle right through the center of the thread and then pull those two pieces tight, and you've got a good connection there that will allow you to go through your holes without getting caught up on a knot or anything. Yeah, now I'm just putting my strap on first. You want to do that before you close and fold over the leather. And for saddle stitching, it's really simple. It takes a minute to get the hang of it. Once you get into a rhythm, it actually it's kind of fun. Go through and to the back side, and then pull those two pieces of thread pretty uniform. Pull them to where they're about even, and then bring the other needle down through to the back side, and then take one of those needles and go back through the corresponding hole next door, out through the front again. And then once you have one needle coming out of the front and one needle coming out of the back, pull them nice and tight. Now when you're going back up through a hole that already has thread through it, be very careful that you don't go through the thread. You'll get knots, and it'll start to catch, and it becomes very difficult to work with if you have that. And it's really hard to back these out once you do that. You'll see in a minute here, I'll show you my technique to help you avoid that. I don't really show it here on this part because there's only 4 holes on this, and it's not a really good example. But you just keep going like that, and once you get it all, once you get all those holes stitched up, pull the needle one more time through to the back, and then tie a little square knot. I like to do it while the needles are still attached. It makes it a little easier to pull a tight knot. Trim your excess pieces off, and then heat up a little bit of metal and use that to gently melt the thread and the wax. You can see I'm just using the back end of a box wrench here. Don't overdo this because you will burn through the thread. You don't want that. Just tap it, and you'll see it'll singe a little bit. And that's usually all it takes. Once that wax and that thread kind of twists on itself, it'll kind of, glue into itself. Again, I'm just using water here to press down this belt strap that I've stitched on. I like to use these, I like to use a diamond pattern for the strap that ends up having the snap on it, and I use those little triangle or chevron shapes to do the belt strap. You can experiment. And this is something I like to do. It's probably not super necessary, especially if you're not riveting or putting anything metal on the inside of the sheath. And some people do like to attach their straps with rivets, and that's fine, but you can scratch your blade if there's metal on the inside, of course. I like to use the thread and the stitch method, and then I'll use these little pieces of felt with a little spray adhesive to cover up that stitching, because once you melt that stitching, it does leave like a little crispy part in there, and theoretically that could scratch your blade too, depending on your handle material and whatever you're using. So this is my way of also I think it looks kind of nice when you put it all together. My way of protecting my blade. We have nothing else to attach to the outside of the sheath, so it's time to actually start the big stitch process with the fold over and the welts. You can use a one-piece welt, by the way. I like sometimes to use a two-piece, and then I leave a little bit of a gap between the two as my, I guess, a drip channel. This knife is not going to be, you know, I'm not going to be walking around in the jungle with this thing. It's not going to be getting filled with rain, but I don't know. It's just a, I guess it's kind of a gimmick because this is more of a decorative piece, but I guess it is good to have some way to drain moisture out in case it gets in there. You can see I'm starting, I like to start at the edge side so that it terminates on the back of the spine side, so you don't see that knot and that doubled over stitch. But we're starting the same way we did before. We, you know, put two pieces through from the front to the back, and then I take one of those pieces once I pull them evenly, and I go up through all the holes, being careful not to go through the thread itself, and I pull it nice and tight. And now that I've got a couple stitches started, you can see I use my thumb here to pull that thread kind of up and out of the way of the hole. That way when I push this needle through, it's not going to run the needle through the thread. So use your thumb or, you know, some way to pull that string tight on the side that when you're passing through to another piece there. It doesn't matter so much if there's no thread in the hole already, of course, but when you're going back through, see how I do it here. I pull it nice and tight. It also helps kind of widen the hole out a little bit. If you're pulling it real tight, it'll kind of stretch the hole, and that allows for a pretty easy passage through from one side to the other. Wiggle it around, twist it, or whatever you got to do. If you run through that thread, pull it out immediately. Don't try to commit to it. It will be a problem for you. And you can see I just went all the way up and everything's looking good. I'm kind of doing a little bit of a fitment check here, and now I'm really being cautious about where I decide to put that button. I've already got the hole for the back side of the button. All those pieces have a different name, but I don't remember what they're called. It's all, you know, pieces of a snap. But anyway, I've got that hole where it's supposed to be, but I want to make sure that I pull this real tight, but I'm also factoring in the thickness of the snap itself. So don't go so tight that you're not going to be able to snap it. You can see, hopefully I show you, hopefully I move my thumb here. I've got it maybe just about 2 or 3 millimeters if they were to, you know, they're not quite laying on top of each other. One's a little bit farther back because I know the thickness of the snap itself is going to kind of force me to have to pull it a little bit tighter. Sometimes these, depending on the kit that you have, again, you can buy this stuff at any leather supply store, but depending on this and the thickness of your leather, you might have to thin the leather out. I think they called it a skiving tool. I forget the name of it. I was cutting it pretty close here. I'm just using my screwdriver to push down the edges around the snap, which will allow me to get those two pieces to catch together. This little piece goes on top, and then that little stem, use an anvil and this little strike tool that usually comes with the snaps that you buy. And that kind of flares that little stem out and turns it into a one piece. And it works similarly on the male piece, which is going to go on the main body of the sheath there. Once I get that all together, I just use another piece of felt, put it right over that. And that's the only piece of metal that I have on the inside of the sheath. So I want to make sure I put something. You could also put another piece of felt inside there if you really wanted to be safe. You could double up on that. I didn't on this one. Really I think I just forgot. Usually I do. I'll put a smaller circle in there, and then I'll put the larger around it. Again, this can all be done by hand. It's just quicker if you have a belt sander. Be very careful now that you don't go into your stitching. But what I'm going for here is I just want to make sure that the profile is uniform on all 3 pieces that I have stacked there. And once I get to that point, we can start the finished work. This is called burnishing gum. Once you're pretty happy with, you've got everything lined up right, you can use water for this too. You don't really need burnishing gum, but I just like to use a little bit of this. It's kind of tacky, and it gives it a nice glossy finish when it's all said and done. But I've really seen great results with water too. I bought this in my earlier days, and I've just been kind of using it, but honestly, I think I get just as good results just using a little bit of water as I go. You can use any piece of hardwood, or something that's not going to warp or splinter, and just quickly rub it back and forth. Sometimes you want a beveled or a curved edge. This one's flat on both sides, so I'm using the flat side of that little burnishing stick that I have. Again, it looks really blotchy right now, but once you get enough of it, this is beeswax, by the way, and that'll seal it really nicely. And it looks really blotchy, but once it all soaks in, it'll give a nice uniform, or at least semi-uniform. I actually don't mind a little bit of blotchiness, by the way. I like that rustic look on my sheaths, some of them, and this one, that's kind of what I'm going for. So it doesn't really bother me that there is some spots that look darker than others. But once it's all done, if I didn't want those spots, it could be avoided. I'm being a little careless about it because I like them. I'm not using any polish or anything on this. I'm just buffing the beeswax, and it gives it a nice shine. It also warms it up, so if there's parts like in the stitching that didn't melt with the heat gun, this is a good way to kind of get those little bits of wax to melt into the stitching. And that's it. For this blade, I think this looks really nice. You can see, again, I was a little bit careless. I've got fingernail marks and marks from bits that were on my bench that have kind of pressed into the leather. But for this particular sheath, kind of encouraged that. I wanted the kind of a worn look on this one. But if you wanted to avoid it, obviously just keep a cleaner workspace and be more careful with your materials. It fits really nicely, really tight, and I really love the way this one turned out. If you have any questions, drop them down below. Any comments, any advice? I'm still kind of a beginner when it comes to the leather work. I'm learning as I go here too, so I'm happy to hear any advice or input from the experts out there. Hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe.